Now, the head of the Unite union, Len McCluskey, hasn't pulled his punches in a magazine article published today accusing certain Labour MPs of sustained smearing of Jeremy Corbyn over anti-Semitism. The 1,500-word article is the cover story in today's New Statesman. Inside, Len McCluskey says, "I have fought anti-Semites all my life, including physically on the streets, and I need no lectures from anyone else on the subject." MPs such as Chris Leslie, Neil Coyle, my own MP, John Woodcock, Wes Streeting, Ian Austin and others have become a dismal chorus whose every dirge makes winning a Labour government more difficult. I look with disgust at the behaviour of the Corbyn hater MPs, and I understand why there is a growing demand for mandatory reselection. Well, we can speak to the New Statesman political editor, George Eaton. It's all in the planning. George, that was a pretty extraordinary article, explosive.
It was. Len had a lot he wanted to get off his chest, and he feels, particularly ahead of the local elections coming up next week, that there are a group of Labour MPs who are determined to undermine Jeremy Corbyn at every opportunity. And obviously it's been well known that Labour is divided. But even so, this was quite an explosive intervention by the head of the largest union and the head of Labour's biggest donor.
Do you think Len McCluskey is speaking with the authority of Jeremy Corbyn, or at least those close to him, bearing in mind Jeremy Corbyn himself said people who protested against anti-Semitism, were not smearing him?
Yes, so Jeremy Corbyn's office were quite clear yesterday that the article wasn't cleared by them, but the links between Jeremy Corbyn and Unite are very clear. Of course, Unite backed him in 2015. They helped protect him in 2016. Len McCluskey's chief of staff, Andrew Murray, works as a part-time aide to Jeremy Corbyn. The new general secretary of the party is Unite's former political director. But certainly, Len has written some things in this piece which are not the official line. But he is the independent head of Unite, and will have his own views on these matters.
What's the reaction been from Labour MPs, from Labour activists to what Len McCluskey said?
So activists have been very supportive of what Len said. They do feel that this issue, polling has shown actually that they feel this issue has been used to undermine Jeremy Corbyn by his internal opponents. And then the MPs themselves have been outraged, as you can imagine, and this has made them perhaps more determined than ever to confront Jeremy Corbyn and his allies over this issue, and they're certainly not retreating. And then others have said that Len McCluskey should devote less time to Labour politics and more time to his members. But interestingly, the context in which this intervention takes place is one in which Len McCluskey's position is the subject of a legal challenge by his former leadership rival, Gerard Coyne. That's playing out in the courts at the moment. And so the theory that some Labour MPs have is that this is a preemptive move by Len McCluskey ahead of another potential Unite General Secretary election if that result is declared, if the previous result is declared invalid. And this is Len displaying his strength and his authority.
George Eaton, thank you very much. Well, we're joined now by one of Len McCluskey's so-called dismal chorus, the Labour MP Chris Leslie. He's probably been called worse. And from Derby, the Labour MP Chris Williamson, who presumably isn't a member of that particular chorus. Anyway, welcome to both of you. Chris Leslie, are you outraged by what Len McCluskey has said?
Well, yeah, it's a very strange piece that he's written. I thought we'd come to the unanimous conclusion, really, that anti-Semitism has and should have no place within the Labour Party at all. And as you were saying earlier, Jeremy himself has said that these concerns are not smears. They are very real and need to be taken seriously. So it's kind of peculiar that Len McCluskey is at odds with the leader of the Labour Party in that way.
Have you been carrying out a sustained smearing of Jeremy Corbyn, as Len McCluskey says?
No. I mean, I think what we are doing, I'm doing, is standing up for what I've always believed in. I'm not a racist. I believe that anti-Semitism is abhorrent, and when we see it, we should call it out. Now, that's the Labour Party I've always known, and I'm kind of, more disappointed, really, that we've got to this stage where, when there's so many other things going on that we should be arguing about and talking about, this keeps rearing its head.
Chris Williamson, Is Chris Leslie part of a dismal chorus of MPs who continue to smear Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think hundreds of thousands of party members, millions of Labour supporters are exasperated and angry about the shenanigans of a handful of Labour MPs. And I think, to be fair, the article that Len McCluskey wrote wasn't denying that there was an issue with anti-Semitism, but the point he was making is that the number of Labour Party members is very small who have engaged in anti-Semitism. And he said, obviously, anybody indulging in anti-Semitic abuse is unwelcome in the Labour Party. But I think part of the problem has been that people have conflated the appalling abuse online with Labour Party members. If there is any evidence against any Labour Party member, then action should be taken immediately. And certainly Len wasn't making any excuses for anti-Semitism. He was calling it out just as strongly as anybody else.
But what's wrong with...
I think it's important that we don't conflate abuse by fake accounts and by people who are hostile to the Labour Party.
So why is
somehow that's to do with the Labour Party?
Right, but why is Len McCluskey then attacking MPs like Chris Leslie for opposing anti-Semitism?
Well, he hasn't criticising them or attacking them, as you put it, for opposing anti-Semitism. What he's saying is that it's been a sustained attack against the Labour Party's position. And it's not just in relation to this issue. It's a whole host of different issues, from Syria to the EU to Chilcot. We've had a chorus of a handful of, I've described them as malcontents, who are completely out of step with party members, with the Labour Party supporters, and indeed with the country as a whole. Because if you look at all the opinion polls, Labour's programme is overwhelmingly backed by the vast majority of the British people, and we should be focusing on the message of hope that Labour is putting forward.
What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I'm in Westminster today to vote on the customs union issue. That's one of the big things that's going to affect my constituents in Nottingham East and the rest of the country. It's about jobs and trade and prosperity. Those are the sorts of things that we should be talking about. Now, when Len McCluskey and some of his supporters start saying you're going to be deselected, start threatening the jobs of members of Parliament for holding views which are actually quite firmly felt principles, actually, not only is that disappointing, but it makes me more determined to stand up against racism, against anti-Semitism, and for the things that are in the best interest, as I see them, for my constituents in Nottingham and for the rest of the country.
But you're a long-standing critic of Jeremy Corbyn. Isn't part of this because you oppose his leadership and you'd like to see him go? Well,
look, I wasn't a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. Issues come along as they do. We can talk about, Chris raises the EU. Chris talked about the gas attacks on children in Douma in Syria. I can talk about the principled stance that I take. I actually haven't really been changing my views. What is most concerning, though, is this threat that somehow we're going to be made redundant, we're not going to get the support. Joe, I don't work for Len McCluskey. I work for the people of Nottingham East, and I'm going to take their best interests as the guide for how I will act.
Chris Williamson, do you want Chris Leslie to be deselected? There was a threat, an implicit threat, in Len McCluskey's article.
Well, there's no threat in Len's article. I mean, what he's saying is that members of Parliament should be accountable to their members.
He said, I can understand why there might be MPs like Chris Leslie who should be deselected. Do you want to see Chris deselected?
Well, that's a matter for Labour Party members in each constituency, and not a matter for me or indeed Len. And I think it's important that people remember, members of Parliament, Labour members of Parliament, remember why they got there, how they got there, and to who they are accountable. They are accountable to the Labour Party, yes, in their constituency. Obviously, they're accountable to the electorate at large.
Well,
but anybody who says that the members don't matter, that...
The problem is, Chris...
Well, let me just finish this point. Let me just finish this point there, Chris. Anybody who says that members don't matter, my message to them is stand as an independent and see how far you get. You won't get elected. And so it's important, I think, that Labour Party members of Parliament recognise the democratically elected leader of the party and, indeed, the policy position of the party and promote that. That's what they're in Parliament to do.
All right, well, let Chris
and anybody who is unable to do that ought to consider their position. And members have a perfect right, in my view, to decide who they want to represent them in Parliament.
Well, this is the kind of gentler politics, of course, here, which is if anybody takes a different view, no matter on an issue of principle, whether it's Europe or whatever, then there is this tap on the shoulder that says you're going to be made redundant, you're going to lose the job. Look, I don't care really what happens to me. And my particular position, because I couldn't look myself in the mirror if I ended up changing my views on these things simply because I was worried about whether I was going to get reselected or, should I just shut up and go away. Anti-Semitism in the Labour Party cannot be tolerated. And Chris, you shouldn't really be sharing platforms with the likes of Jackie Walker, who claims that the slave trade is financed by Jews. I don't think it's appropriate. And you also have a big role to play in standing up against anti-Semitism, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Right. I mean, Chris Williamson?
Well, what I would say to Chris is, does he believe in accountability? Does he believe that members have any right to determine who their representatives will be at any given election? We are members of the Labour Party. We're Labour MPs.
Answer the question about sharing a platform with Jackie Walker. Are you comfortable doing that?
Well, listen, it's irrelevant in my view, and I'm not going to get into an issue about internal party matters.
Why? I mean, if you're happy to share a platform, why don't you say so?
Well, listen, the point is that there are internal party disciplinary proceedings going on, and people are entitled to due process, and I'm not going to indulge in a trial by media. Now, Chris might think that's perfectly acceptable, but I happen to believe in natural justice. He might not. And I also happen to believe in democracy and believe in accountability to the party members and indeed obviously to the wider electorate.
All I would say, Joe, is that it was Jeremy Corbyn himself who has said that these concerns about anti-Semitism are not smears. For Len McCluskey, and by implication, Chris, to suggest that they are and that this is somehow going on for other political reasons is not what the leader of the Labour Party is, we're told, calling for. And I will not, and Chris, I will not be intimidated or threatened. You can raise that spectre of deselection as many times as you like. It will just make me more determined to stand up for what the values of the Labour Party that I have always known.
Do you feel under threat currently of deselection?
Well, I just look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph. But actually, that I think makes me feel more determined to speak out.
All right, Chris Williamson and Chris Leslie.
Well, I mean, I wish Chris would speak out on the issues.
Well, go on, finish your sentence, Chris Williamson.
No, well, OK, fine. No, I just wish that Chris would speak out on the issues that actually secured nearly 13 million votes at the last general election.
Well, I'm here to vote on the customs union today. What are you...
Overwhelmingly supported by the vast majority of the Labour Party members.
I'll see you at the vote at 3 o'clock.
Chris and Chris, you can continue. You can continue this conversation since you're in the same party, of course. Thank you both very much.